Hello, and it's Wednesday, the 21st of December, 2011. I can hear sleigh bells in the background. Welcome to the Phonecast, produced for the UK mobile phone industry and sponsored by 51degrees.mobi, providing device data and device detection for thousands of companies online. My name is Ian Graham. I'm your host for this edition, and joining me is James Rosewell, the owner of mobile technology business 51degrees.mobi, and Mark Bridge, who's an independent technology writer. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ian.
Oh, full of the festive spirit, I trust.
Less than 1 week to go.
Indeed, and as it's the last edition of the Phonecast before Christmas, and in fact the last edition of 2011, today we're going to be doing our best to predict what will happen in the mobile industry next year. But before we do that, here's the interesting bit, let's cast our minds back to what we thought 2011 would be like. Here's a reminder of our podcast from December 2010, a whole 1 year ago. So what do you think is going to happen?
I think the biggest thing will happen in the industry next year is the launch of the wholesale application community version 2 specification at Mobile World Congress, and then kind of commercial WAC compliant handsets coming out later in the year. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether WAC is going to be a commercial success, but one of the things I think it does for the technology is it forces compliance like we've never seen before when it comes to browsers and handsets. So the technical benefits are going to be huge. It won't necessarily be kind of a game-changing impact next year, but certainly the potential to provide consistent technology and a consistent platform shouldn't be overlooked. As far as handsets and sort of manufacturers are concerned, I think we're going to see Windows 7.1 phone being released pretty quickly in 2011. I think there's a number of niggles that they need to get sorted out, but let's not write Windows Phone 7 off. The first Android phone, the G1, contained a number of pretty serious defects when you look back on it, and they were able to be sorted out in software. And now Android is pretty much the fastest growing operating, well, it is the fastest growing mobile phone operating system I think we've ever seen. So let's not write Windows 7 off, but I'm sure there's going to be a few patches, particularly at the beginning of next year. And sticking with manufacturers, I wouldn't be surprised to actually see Apple's market share decline. I think their revenue will grow, but their market share of overall global handset sales could well decline next year.
Well, James, based on what we've been talking about on the Phonecast recently and Apple's surge into the marketplace, that's quite a brave prediction to make.
Well, it's based on a number of things. One is the growth of Android phones. I think you're going to see more and more people who, without Android, would have bought an Apple phone without thinking, will now look to Android. I talked about Windows 7, and I think, again, if that kind of gets sorted out, it's an alternative at that high end of the market. And we talked about BlackBerry actually beating Apple only by 100,000 handsets, but nevertheless, it's still a larger number. And all of those things could conspire together to keep Apple in their niche. So yes, the brand's still strong, but there's now real choice at this end of the market that there hasn't been before.
I have to say, though, the iPhone still has that cool effect, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And therefore, as you say, it's a brave prediction. But with more and more people buying smartphones, the share of the overall global handset sales could well decline.
And I think I'll stick one in here just based on the story, the Apple stories, is that I hope and think there's going to be a proliferation of tablet devices. We've seen the Samsung come in following the launch of the iPad, and I think we're going to see a lot more, but they'll come down very dramatically in price.
Yeah, that's right. I completely agree with you. And a lot of them will run Android. And the second half of the year, we're going to see a load of Chrome, which will be Google's new operating system, browser-based operating system, effectively come in. And again, we'll see more tablets running that.
And I would say, particularly when it comes to tablets, watch out for the BlackBerry Playbook. I can see that going down really well with the enterprise market. All those IT managers who've been putting off staff getting iPads because they don't want to integrate them with the system will be delighted to go out and buy the BlackBerry Playbook for them. And I think also, when it comes to tablets, I think Motorola, again, are going to have a device that certainly is going to be very widely acclaimed, although that doesn't necessarily mean it'll sell well, of course.
I kind of agree with you in principle. However, I'd have to say it's a brave IT manager that in these times of sort of tough budget constraint is going to go out and invest in tablets for staff.
If we're going to see this huge increase or large increase and a continuing increase in the use of tablets, are we going to see the decline of the laptop and the netbook?
No.
Certainly not the laptop. I think to an extent the netbook, but certainly not the laptop.
No, I think the sort of case for tablets is they do something different, an electronic form where you want to turn it round and show the customer. It's a great device for that. It's a great device for looking at certain types of content, video, newspapers, etc. It's a reasonable device for reading books. But they're all different things to what you would use a laptop for. Anything where you've got extensive typing, for example, you really do need a proper keyboard. So I do think they fill.
They're a market, but they're not a take. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. There's overlap between them, but I don't think the functionality a tablet provides replaces a netbook.
And Mark, what are you going to add to this?
Well, I'll add a manufacturer one to start with. I think it's going to be a tough year for Samsung. I'm not saying they're going to struggle. What I am saying is they're going to have some tough competition. HTC are going to be doing their best to eat away at the volume part of their customer base, and I would say that LG are going to be hacking away at the stylish Android smartphone end. So, as I say, not a problem year in that sense for Samsung, but they're going to have to up their game because their competitors are certainly upping their game. Nokia, I'm not convinced by the MeeGo platform from a consumer point of view. I think it's going to end up being a bit like the N900, the MIMO platform. I can't see that really going any great shakes, not least because there aren't going to be any applications developed for it really until the phone comes out. There are also rumours at the moment when it comes to Nokia that are suggesting Nokia could end up making phones that run Windows Phone 7. That doesn't seem very likely to me either, with one caveat: if Nokia is bought by Microsoft. Now, I don't see that as particularly likely, but if I were to stick my neck out and come up with a prediction that, if I get it right, will put me up with legendary futurists, and if I get wrong will make me look a little bit stupid, I would say Nokia, Microsoft and Intel one enormous partnership next year. That's my sticking my neck out, really not at all likely to happen, but if it does, my goodness, will I look smart.
Mark Nostradamus Bridge.
That's what they call me. Other than that, nothing particularly good, although I would say watch out for gaming. I think cross-platform gaming will become really big. Not simply putting, say, Angry Birds on Android and also on iPhone, but actually letting people interact between different platforms.
Yeah, I think you're right with Windows 7. We'll probably see some sort of PlayStation on a mobile, not just an app that allows you to see your highest score.
Again, sticking my neck out one, I would be prepared to guess that there won't be a Sony Ericsson PlayStation phone. It'll actually be branded differently. Perhaps it'll be licensed to another manufacturer. Perhaps Sony themselves will put it out. But again, I'm probably going to be very wrong with this one, but it wouldn't surprise me if the PlayStation brand was licensed to another manufacturer to use.
Yeah, possibly, or as you say, Sony do it as an entirely Sony branded product. But I think it would be damaging to the Sony Ericsson partnership to not have Ericsson technology and involvement somewhere, even if they don't carry the brand. On your point about consolidation, Mark, I think you've probably been very specific by naming the companies, but I would be inclined to agree with you. I think we're going to see big companies taking over other big companies or merging with other big companies, and Intel is the company that stand out for me as a company that really need to, get into the mobile space, and they're just not doing it. But they need to do something.
And on a more day-to-day basis, when we're talking about takeovers and everything else, in dealer land, I think we're going to see much more of the same happening. We're going to see the convergence even stronger of the fixed line and the mobile businesses. The mobile dealers are looking for specialist fixed line salespeople, and the fixed line salespeople are looking for mobile specialists. And we're going to see a lot more of that as time goes on. A lot more dealers consolidating themselves.
Yeah, the pure play mobile phone deal is a thing of the past.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been saying that for some time, but I think we've now actually reached that actuality.
Yes, and it's not just fixed and mobile, it's also, traditional technology support, providing laptops, supporting
Yes.
a small business's technology infrastructure. It kind of,
The
goes...
complete package.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we'll sit down in a year's time and see how right we've been next year and feeling smug. So there are tips. Or not. Yes. Yes. Trouble is, once it's said, we can't unsaid it, can we?
Blimey, we were insightful.
Weren't we just? I still think, as you told me there, though, James, I should have been less specific. I think if you keep your predictions vague, you're in with a much better chance of getting them right. And I'm not going to fall for that one this year.
I finally learned.
So, gentlemen, what would you say were the highlights, and dare I say it, as if we would make them, and the big mistakes from last year's predictions?
Well, I think that we didn't anticipate quite what a game changer the iPad would be. We were talking there about maybe netbook sales being affected a little bit. Well, I would suggest that the iPad has pretty much trampled on the netbook, and it's done that by having a different form factor. And what's happened is that if people have wanted a laptop, they've bought a laptop, and if they wanted a cheap laptop, they've bought a cheap laptop, because now, the way that prices have gone, you can actually get a larger screen laptop for what you used to be able to get the price of a netbook. So there was no point in buying a netbook for portability, really, unless you were absolutely desperate to have the keyboard. And to be honest, the style of the iPad has taken over from it. Now, next year, I think we're going to see another split in the laptop market. I think the Ultrabook stands a pretty good chance of doing well. The Ultrabook is a very slim, high-powered laptop. But, as I say, I think we didn't predict the iPad, and we didn't quite predict the way that that was going to split the tablet market either. The top end of the tablet market is pretty much the iPad. Yes, we've got Samsung, HTC, Motorola and BlackBerry all out there, but certainly for many people the top end of the tablet market is the iPad. And then there's the bottom end of the tablet market, which is some obscure budget manufacturer. There isn't really any middle to the tablet market.
And the price point's been pretty much set by the iPad, hasn't it? That's it. You've got to have a product that's really good, and it's got to be cheaper than the iPad.
Yeah, I mean, of late we've seen a lot of price cutting going around those premium tablets.
Except the iPad.
Except the iPad.
And isn't that just testament to their marketing and to their sales strategy in general?
Well, I think it's brand and brand loyalty.
Yeah.
Something that probably is worth noting, and that's the use of Wi-Fi in tablets. I think when tablets launched, a lot of people thought that the tablet everyone would buy would be the Wi-Fi plus 3G version, but the reality, I think, is that most people are quite happy with Wi-Fi only on the tablet.
Certainly what you said there was true. Everybody was going for the 3G version when it came out.
I may be wrong, this is just gut feeling, instinct, but I think there's a lot more interest in the Wi-Fi only versions, not least because of the price.
Yes, and no contract and all that sort of stuff, yes.
Yeah. While I'm talking and while I'm sticking with the downside, yes, I'll admit I got it completely wrong with the PlayStation phone, although you could argue that, well, the next PlayStation phone will be a Sony. It won't be Sony Ericsson, because every phone's going to be a Sony and not Sony Ericsson from their perspective. And also, Samsung didn't struggle with HTC and LG. I would say the latter two perhaps took their eyes off the ball a little bit in some instances. Although Samsung did have struggles, they were legal battles, and they were with Apple.
Yeah, I think we all underestimated the impact of the legal battles. I mean, who would have thought a year ago you'd actually have companies successfully getting injunctions to stop other companies selling their products in certain territories? And something that certainly I thought would be resolved maturely within the industry without either journalists or consumers ever being aware of it, went completely the other way. And I do think that's a worrying sign for 2012, because it looks like a lot more of that's going to be continuing.
You did say here that there will be some decline in netbooks, but James, you said they'll still have a place.
Yeah, and I think what Mark was saying earlier about the rise of the Ultrabook is the evolution of the netbook, and almost some sort of hybrid between a tablet and a netbook.
But bigger.
But bigger, but thinner, and lighter. So good news for big bag manufacturers.
Yes. Motorola having a widely acclaimed tablet?
Yeah, well, I would say it was widely acclaimed. It just didn't sell. Much like the Playbook, which again I said was going to do really well and hasn't. Again, yeah, we've ended the year with prices being cut.
Yeah, 150,000 sold or something, wasn't it?
Quarterly figures,
pretty unremarkable number. And Google making their first major mistake with Chrome tablets and Chrome netbooks really haven't taken off at all. Completely misjudged, the market and the opportunity there, which is very unusual for Google.
From a more positive note, we got some things right, certainly from a personal perspective. Sadly, I was right about MeeGo, and I fear that next year you could just substitute the name Tizen for MeeGo and I would still be right. I hope not, but I think I will be. And I kind of got the radical change for Nokia and Microsoft, although Intel didn't join the party. Slightly disappointed there because, as I said at the time, my name could be up in lights if I'd got that one right.
You were 2/3 right.
And sticking with Intel, they haven't really moved into the mobile space as much as I think they need to, although it won't be till Mobile World Congress 2012 that we'll know a little bit more about what's happening from Intel, but certainly not the major waves I was hoping for.
And from a dealer perspective, I mean, we've certainly, but this was just a very bland prediction in my estimation, and I'm the one that made it, but we've certainly seen more fixed line mobile convergence. I cannot think now of a dealer that is just a standalone cellular dealer anymore. I think that beast is now dead. And consolidation within the dealer business, well, that's also happened, though to a lesser degree. I haven't heard of any really big ones this year.
Well, I think that's more to do with people being cautious as opposed to the deals not being there ready to be done once things improve in the economy. But
that could be some time, James.
I was going to say it could be some time.
Yes. We're not in Europe anymore. Had you noticed?
Oh, I've heard something about it, something about a veto.
We didn't predict that, did we?
No, we didn't. What we can predict is that the UK is going to go into a Japan-style low-growth decade, and businesses need to, recognise that and be prepared for that. And when you're talking about dealers, that means, stick to what you do well. And I think the small independent dealers have very loyal customers. If they can keep working with those loyal customers, recognise the demands that those loyal customers have, then they will not only stay in business but grow modestly in these tough times ahead. And I think that's really where the independent dealer comes in. They need to present value to their customers and continue to provide them a good service, recognising the demands that their customers face.
And that's what they have been doing ever since dealers were invented.
Yeah, and it's going to be very hard for the mobile networks and these bigger players to get in there and have that kind of same personal relationship.
Well, they don't have the trust that the smaller dealer and the independent dealer gets with the customers.
Exactly. So, tough business ahead. And I think, tough business for applications as well. We talked about the wholesale application community, really haven't seen very much from them. I think probably most worryingly, you buy a mobile phone, it still doesn't have guaranteed a WAC runtime engine on it. And until that starts to happen, we're not really going to see WAC becoming a huge force to be reckoned with, certainly in the UK market.
What's WAC?
Wholesale Application Community. It's the Mobile Networks global initiative to create a wholesale application environment where there's the same technologies across multiple handsets and an easy wholesale route to market for application stores to piggyback on the top of.
So it's been a relatively quiet year for WAC. The same can't be said of Microsoft, though, can it?
Well, I think 2011 has been a year of preparation. We've seen the Lumia phone come out with Nokia. We've heard announcements from other manufacturers that they're going to continue to create Windows Phone devices. We've had Mango come out, which is the major version upgrade, effectively, of the Windows Phone operating system. And that's really created a operating system that should have been what Windows Phone was when it first launched a year ago. So I think 2011 has been about preparation. 2012 is going to be about execution. And I think we're going to see Windows 8 come out on the desktop. It's been positioned as a tablet operating system. We have manufacturers all the traditional manufacturers that create netbooks and laptops that run Microsoft products have tablets. They have the ability to assemble tablets. They're going to have tablets and netbook devices running various Windows operating systems. And I think by the time we get to the end of 2012, we're going to see a 100% increase in Microsoft's market share of the mobile and tablet device sector.
That's moving into a prediction for next year, isn't it?
It is. Is that a good segue?
I think it was, yes. You're listening to the Phonecast, sponsored by 51degrees.mobi, a company that provides device data and device detection for thousands of companies online. And with us, of course, is James, who's the co-founder and managing director of 51 Degrees. One of the problems that comes up, James, quite a lot when accessing websites from your touchscreen phone is when you put your great big fat finger on it, you often click on the wrong website. Is there anything that 51 Degrees does to help that?
Well, it's the wrong link. It's the wrong button, isn't it? You get these links that are perfectly readable, but it's far too easy to press the wrong link, isn't it?
Correct. Very easy.
Yeah, and because we've got all this intelligence that we can deploy to the web developer and the web designer, we can help with that problem by allowing developers and designers to size links so that they're finger-sized when accessed on a touch screen, but when they're accessed on a non-touch screen, they are readable and selectable using the joypad or click wheel or whatever is being used on that particular device. So we provide the intelligence to make it really simple to deploy selectable links, selectable buttons for the form factor and particularly the input method that they're being displayed and used on.
And again, the intelligence is all on the server.
We work in harmony with the mobile device. So the problem with the technology at the moment, client side, is you can't guarantee that the phone's going to support it. And even if it does support the major kind of headline grabbing standards such as HTML5, which incidentally is still not entirely ratified by the W3C, even if it does support those major technology groups, there's various different subsets of implementation and they're implemented very slightly differently, which makes it very difficult for developers and designers to get a consistent experience across every type of mobile device. With 51 Degrees, we can achieve that because we're not reliant on certain client technology, but then neither do we prevent people and developers and designers using it. So 51 Degrees works in harmony with these emerging technologies and just provides more options for developers and designers to solve problems that you've quite rightly identified of people clicking on the wrong link or the wrong button simply because they're too small. And
that is very frustrating.
It happens all the time. And even big name websites, for example, the BBC's homepage, the links are not big enough on touchscreen phones, some touchscreen phones, when you use them to reliably press the right one, and very often we end up making mistakes and having to go back. If you apply that to an e-commerce transaction and a checkout process, that can result in lost orders.
Yes, or wrong orders.
Oh, indeed.
Yes. So again, what it's really about is improving the customer experience at the front end.
Yeah, we're just trying to provide tools that increase the kind of armory of solutions that developers and designers have available to provide better user experiences.
Well, that sounds very good, James, and thanks very much for that indeed.
Shall we talk about 2012?
I think that's a good idea. Let's take a look at the future. So what do we think 2012 will be like?
Well, I'll kick things off, and as I said, I really don't want to be too specific because that backs me into a corner a bit. So my very vague predictions are maybe there'll be some kind of 4G auction in the UK. You never know.
Oh, Mark.
Perhaps Apple might introduce a device or two, maybe a phone, maybe a tablet. Okay. I think mobile payments won't be that big in the UK. There'll be some kind of headline-grabbing stunt around the Olympics, whether it's Samsung, whether it's Google, whether it's Visa, I don't know. But I don't think we're going to see a lot of big stuff in the UK, just more smaller launches. I think on a bigger scale, we're going to see more mobile technology being used outside the law, or on the edge of the law, or inside where the law should be, depending on your perspective. We had the so-called Facebook revolution in Tunisia. We've got something similar happening in Russia to an extent. We had Bambuser being used for video streaming in Egypt. We've had BlackBerry Messenger in the UK when there was rioting. There have even been apps developed for Occupy Wall Street. I think we're going to see more of that kind of stuff. We talked about legal action. I think we're going to see that getting more sophisticated. I think companies may try more to keep their names out of the headlines, but they'll still be doing the suing.
Yeah.
And again, a fairly general one, admittedly, but I think we're going to see more and more retailers getting into mobile, not necessarily making a big song and dance about it, but integrating all sorts of things: location, loyalty, coupons, price comparison, augmented reality, or maybe even just getting a decent mobile site. But I think we're going to see more and more high street retailers taking mobile a lot more seriously. More specific stuff, I think, to be honest, the way that the economy is, and this is a bit of an excuse, I know, but I think that's going to make it quite difficult to predict what's going to happen. I would say RIM is going to make some big changes. I'm not sure what. I think maybe they might drop the playbook. Perhaps there'll be something big happening with the new operating system. Most likely, I think it's going to be a reorganization, but certainly something big happening at RIM. I would say we're going to see Android handset manufacturers moving away from tablets and heading for the superphone, heading for a large screen smartphone, say a 5-inch screen, rather than a 10-inch tablet. And on the back of what James was saying, I think it's going to be a good year for Microsoft. Overall, if there was one word for 2012, I would say that word would be enabling. I think the trend will be doing more with what you've already got.
Yeah, I think there are two key sort of trends that you've talked about there, Mark, and you've really summed it up. One is the economy. I think it's going to have a massive impact on the cost of mobile handsets and what people simply can afford. And this is absolutely brilliant for Android in particular. You're going to see the rise, as you say, of the sort of super tablet, super phone combination. And retailers are going to want to stock these products because they're at a price point that people that are very price conscious are going to be interested in. And I think that represents a challenge for the high end. It would lead to Apple's market share continuing to decline, although revenues continuing to grow. And it's good news for Microsoft, who have the pockets in order to be able to subsidize a successful kind of mass rollout of their operating system. I would see them doubling market share next year at the expense of BlackBerry and Apple.
One of the things that's been troubling us over the last couple of years, gentlemen, is the amount of legal suing and patent infringements and other such stuff. Do you see this continuing and getting worse next year?
I think ultimately businesses are not doing this to each other just for fun or just to prove an emotional point. There is kind of hard business taking place behind these lawsuits. And I think what we're going to see happening is a number of these companies starting to settle with one another, and everything will depend on the position that Apple decides to take. They can either start settling and accepting payments or some sort of compromise agreement, or they choose not to and continue to go down the route that they're kind of driving everyone down. So that'll have a big impact on it. And I think a lot will depend on how Apple's management team adapt to the absence of Steve Jobs.
That's going to be a big miss in the new year, isn't it? He's going to be missed an awful lot.
He's missed already. He's a pioneer of the industry. But I think Apple will be reshaped by this experience. It's probably the second biggest sort of change in its direction that it's experienced, or the third, depending on whether you know how you count these things. And it's going to have a big impact on the rest of the industry because it's Apple that are sort of taking a very entrenched view on a lot of this legal action, and a lot will depend on whether they want to continue to bother to do that or not. I suspect they will continue. I expect these things will run its course, but more and more the non-Apple camp will work closer and closer together.
You know, it's interesting that we talk a lot about what's happened to manufacturers last year, and we talk about the application developers, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing we don't talk about much and haven't spoken about much is the sort of people you'd expect us to in a funny sort of way, which is the networks. They've almost faded into the background now, haven't they?
Are you saying they've become bit pipes?
I always remember that Vodafone never wanted to become a utility. It was always determined that it never wanted to be a utility like the gas or the electricity. But in effect, that is what it has become, is it not?
Well, not quite. At least here in the UK, we're still referring to them as networks. We're not calling them carriers, which is very much admitting they're a pipe. However, When you look at, for example, the closure of Vodafone 360, is that a final admission from Vodafone that really it should just stick to being a mobile phone network and offering, yes, value-added services as a network, but not trying to get too clever about stuff?
In other words, do the job it's good at and be satisfied with it.
I think, Ian, you've got a good point. I think the company that stands out for me as a network that is not rolling over in that regard is O2.
O2, absolutely, yes.
So
they are the one, yes.
Well, they've successfully established their brand in entertainment. They've invested a lot in their priority moments solutions, and whilst the barrage of text messages is irritating for some people, the application is good, and they seem to have high street retailers on board and internet retailers on board with it. So arguably they are being successful in establishing their brand beyond being a mere carrier.
Well, I was interested. I was at a food exhibition in London last week, and everybody was wearing badges as to who they were and where they were from. And the number of O2 priority passes I saw people wearing was quite amazing.
Yeah, because they've recognised that you don't do this sort of stuff on the cheap. And they're doing very well there, and they've established their brand, as I say, in entertainment in a way that the other networks can only marvel at, really.
And I guess Everything Everywhere, which it could be a prediction here that Everything Everywhere as a name will not last next year. I'm
staggered that it has just taken so long for some of these things to start to happen, and I'm sure the parent companies are also holding a similar view. You know, it's nice to see the synergies about the network starting to come together, as we talked about last week, and something has to happen with the brand.
And will that be, do you think therefore it's going to be called, dare I say it, Orange?
I think that's got to be the logical way forward, hasn't it? It's the stronger of the two brands, and you know, who really wants to spend a huge amount of money establishing another brand?
Yes, but it's not establishing another brand, is it? They've already got T-Mobile there. T-Mobile is part of the partnership, and now that the AT&T merger in the States has fallen through, it may well be determined to hang on to its name.
You're right, Mark. There's a lot of factors here, that happen internationally, etc. But I can't help feeling that they would enjoy more success if they embarked on further consolidation, and certainly there would be cost reductions as well, which are going to be very important in 2012.
And I don't see these days, just my observational, really, I do not see so much publicity and hype around the Three network in the UK.
I think Three have quite a good viral kind of internet-only campaign going on at the moment. You can hardly move for banner adverts on certain sites from Three, where they're talking about how they've got the best quality network for data. They've always had, very price-focused, value-focused marketing, and I'd expect to see more of that. And customers, recognising what I was saying about tablets and budget devices earlier, moving across to Three in droves if the other networks don't respond from a price point of view.
So do you think they're almost going to turn into a data-only network?
Oh, they already are.
That's an interesting comment, James.
All networks are carrying more data than they're carrying voice.
Understand that.
You can't talk to someone within a mobile network who won't tell you off the record that the iPhones of this world have the worst voice call radios in them, the worst for voice quality. No one will go on record and say it. And certainly I know lots of business people who have abandoned their iPhones because they just can't get the good quality voice calls that you can get with a more boring manufacturer. Is voice quality a major purchasing decision? No, not anymore. People may end up regretting their choice later when they discover that voice isn't perhaps what they would like it to be. And I think that all plays to Three's favour.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen more than one push, haven't we, from networks trying to sell high-definition voice services, high-quality voice services, but they've not really come to anything.
Yeah, because what's there's good enough. It's like, HD or 3D. Actually, what's the need to move? Because actually, I'm okay with what I've got today.
Okay, so that's done that. I guess the next thing to move on to is the applications world, which we have talked an awful lot about in this last 12 months. Where's that going?
if one part of the battle is for the consumers, the other part of the battle is for the developers. And we're seeing the established big companies, Rovio with Angry Birds, for example, porting their proven product, their proven game onto all the different platforms that are out there. I think what we're going to start to see happen is more and more applications coming into that space where there's developers behind, companies behind them, the game or the solution or the utility or whatever it might be gains mass recognition through social media, and those companies enjoying a great deal of success with their applications and then porting them to more and more platforms. We'll even start to see the platform owners doing more of what Microsoft has done, which is effectively paying people with successful iPhone applications to port them to the Windows platform.
And perhaps 2012 might be the year for social gaming, bearing in mind that 2011 clearly wasn't.
Well, I fear, Mark, you might be right. I'm really not sure about the value of checking in to particular locations and becoming the mayor of your local Starbucks. But then I guess I'm still not convinced by Twitter.
Perhaps not, but I can see, therefore, much more value in, if I've got an Android phone, being able to play a game against somebody who's got an iPhone or a BlackBerry.
Yeah, the importance of the platform when it comes to applications is certainly going to reduce for all the factors we just talked about.
And just to tie in applications to our previous story, of course, something that the mobile networks do seem to be very good at is building relationships with developers. In many cases, I'm not quite sure where they're going with them, but certainly O2 and Vodafone have both been very vocal in the last 12 months. Orange has had a developer program running for quite a while as well.
Yes, I think they've enjoyed varying degrees of success. And also, I can't talk about applications without talking about the wholesale application community. I think it will be make or break by the summer of 2012 for the wholesale application community.
Do you think as quick as that?
Yes, I think they have to get product out there in the Western world, US, Europe, or ultimately the whole thing will end up falling apart. And they can't blame, it's been useful from a standards point of view. There's been a big lobbying force from the overall network industry, not just the UK, with the W3C, and we're going to have HTML5 being finally agreed next year and all the standards coming together for that. WAC sits on the top of that, and I think we would want to be seeing or the networks will want to be seeing some commercial success in the second half of next year.
Well, those are our predictions for next year. We've covered networks, we've covered applications, we've covered manufacturers, and we've covered the law, I think. So we've now shared all these with the world, and we'll return to just see how accurate they were in 12 months' time. You've been listening to a special festive edition of the Phonecast, sponsored by 51degrees.mobi. You'll find all our podcasts online at thephonecast.com. That's THEPHONECAST. And you can use your mobile phone to visit the same address because it'll automatically adapt the site to fit the screen. Alternatively, you can download each program from our website, from our RSS feed, or from iTunes. You'll also find our weekly news broadcast on the mobile news website at mobilenews@cwp.co.uk and on the Independent Mobile Phone Dealers Association website at impda.co.uk. Finally, if you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, simply click register in the top right-hand corner of our webpage. Thank you for listening. We'll now be taking a break for Christmas and be back with our first show of 2012 on Wednesday, the 4th of January. A Merry Christmas and a happy and prosperous New Year to all our many, many listeners.